South Africa is in a crisis of meaning. It has to be said, and not many people are saying it, that South Africa as a nation is struggling to find meaning, the purpose of who and what we are, the purpose of the whole thing, our country, the people, and where we're going. This lack of meaning or purposelessness is not any more clear than in the recent 5 stories that would each take up a whole news week in Australia or a country like that. In South Africa, they seem to all happen all at once. Of course, there is the resignation of Floyd Shivambu from the EFF to join the MK. Then there is the case of the Nigerian girl, Chidima Aditsina, trying to compete in Miss South Africa and become Miss South Africa. Everyone who opposed this being called a xenophobe, obviously. While that was happening, 95 fighting-age Libyan males were found, tried in court, and deported from a military training camp in Mpumalanga after being here on legal visas to study security guarding. They were doing a lot more than security guarding in that camp. As they were in court, a pastor was getting arrested and sent to court for bringing a panga into a school, with his bodyguard wielding a weapon, of course, an AK-47 or something, all to get his grandchildren out of the school. This was all part of a custody battle with the children's maternal grandmother. And finally, the 5th story that shows us that we're in a crisis of meaning is the story of the mayor of Johannesburg, who seemed to be unqualified to be the mayor of Johannesburg or the mayor of anywhere. He was asked to move and clean out his desk, while a new mayor, who was mayor for only 20 days sometime in the past, took his place, took the reins and became mayor for real. Will he last longer than 20 days this time? Only time will tell. Joburg changes mayors faster than MK fires members of parliament, it would seem. So why do I say that this shows us that South Africa has a serious crisis of meaning as a country? Well, I'll tell you. But before that, please hit the subscribe button. I hear if you don't hit the subscribe button, Cyril Ramaphosa will be president forever. We don't want that, do we? The MK and the EFF. The first reason South Africa has a crisis of meaning, why our country is struggling to find meaning in what the country is and what it's about and where it's going, is because too many prominent leaders see themselves and the quest for power as the only meaning, that our lives and our country must submit to their desires. Take this EFF MK scenario where Floyd Shivambu has now moved to the MK, leaving a party he started with his former friend Julius Malema. When Julius Malema was expelled from the ANC and Floyd Shivambu decided to come with him and start the EFF, you would have thought this thing would never be broken apart. Everyone was surprised by this. It caught everyone by surprise. So what does it mean? Is it a way to merge the two parties, the MK and the EFF? Is it Floyd Shivambu wanting to find his own space to lead because Julius Malema won't let him? Is it the end of the EFF and the rising of the MK? Is it a stroke of genius by JZ? Or a stroke of genius by Floyd Shivambu, perhaps a stroke of genius by Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu? The truth is far simpler than that, obviously. It is all those things, because all of them are possible. Yet it is none of all that, because it's all about power games. Of course, Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu have had a falling out. That's what happened. Julius Malema is an obvious tyrant and is not hiding it. That man rules the EFF with an iron fist, and as far as he's concerned, and as far as we are all concerned, he is the EFF. No one will surpass him unless he allows it. As surprising and unexpected as Floyd Shivambu's leaving of the EFF is, it is in fact still meaningless. That is because what we are witnessing is more power games. Politicians looking to gain power for themselves and looking for ways and opportunities to do that, to gain positions and power. That is all that it means for the politicians. Their meaning is gaining power for themselves. For South Africa, this is meaningless shuffling, because what do you have after all of that? You have a left-wing bloc, or a left-wing caucus as Floyd Shivambu has referred to them. You have a left-wing bloc run on personality cults, the first being that of Jacob Zuma and the other of Julius Malema. Everyone else is just moving their chairs around. They are the pile of power-hungry people in between them. From Floyd Shivambu to Jacob Zuma's daughter, whatever her name is, that evil woman, who cares? A pox on her and her father. My point is, power is the only meaning for these people actually. Power is their religion and their God. They, meaning Jacob Zuma, Julius Malema, Floyd Shivambu, and the daughter, whatever her name is, what they want is for the masses, the citizens, to find meaning in the politics, for the masses to give their lives and their meaning to the politics and these political leaders, to hold them up and to keep them in power, whether they are wearing a red shirt or the new green shirt that's running about out there. In the end, there is no meaning to be found here in South Africa at the moment. And these people are taking us nowhere. They lack all useful purpose for South Africa, for their purpose actually is very well defined. They want power over everything. There is one good thing that can come out of this for South Africa that can bring some meaning, and hopefully that develops. If the EFF and the MK can keep each other distracted with fighting each other and distracted with infighting in their own groups, as they slowly begin to lose the favor of the public and the supporters out there, while another more right-wing force slowly and quietly begins to develop with meaningful and purposeful ideas, growing to become a force and uninterrupted by the left-wing caucus because they're busy fighting each other. That would be the best case scenario in my opinion, and the best and most meaningful thing that can come out of this. It would also be meaningful because South Africa would have the opportunity to reject the left and choose ideas that can build South Africa, infusing meaning into our politics and country with meaningful ideas, not just power games. The Miss SA scandal. The second reason South Africa has a crisis of meaning was clear and visible in the Miss SA scandal. You see, a young woman named Chidima Adechina tried to compete in the Miss South Africa pageant. It was found out that this young girl may not even be a South African. Hence, strictly speaking, she could not and does not qualify to compete in the pageant. That is because her father is Nigerian, and it was later found out that her mother may have committed fraud, getting fraudulent South African papers. She is believed to be a Mozambican. Everyone who stood up and asked for Chidima to be looked into properly so that we could understand if she was a South African or not was obviously called xenophobic, self-hating, and so on. Where are those people who were calling people that now? No apology, no retractions. They were calling people xenophobic. Now that it's been proven correct, where are they? This story showed us what has been present in South Africa for some years now. The desire for meaning in South African citizens. Meaning, who is a South African? What does it mean to be a South African? This was the real story behind the pageant contestant. A South African is defined more than just by the papers. It is about a shared history, the traditions, certain groups of ethnicities actually, and a shared future. Whether we like it or not, it is sort of written in the heart. It is that sort of thing actually. It is more than just about what's on the outside or what's on paper. That is what all those things add up to. It is not just about the papers. Chidima is not really like us or one of us. And you know what? That's fine. She doesn't need to be. She can be herself. We too choose to be ourselves and do not want to be called xenophobic for having a meaningful concept of who a South African is and what that means. It is not just anyone who calls themselves one or wants to be one. The ANC and the EFF want no borders. For that reason and for other reasons, we don't want them. It means something to be a South African and to live in South Africa. They don't seem to get that. It means something when one says they are a South African. Hence, if you are not one, you cannot just be in our pageant. Being Miss South Africa really matters actually. It is not just some beauty contest as people like to call it. Miss South Africa is a cultural symbol and cultural artifact. It meant something when the first black woman, Jackie Mofokeng, was crowned as Miss South Africa. That was a declaration that this too is a South African. So now we are supposed to let people who are not South Africans compete for that very same crown? God forbid. Thus rendering the very concept of South Africa in the title Miss South Africa meaningless. South Africa is looking for meaning and purpose going into the future. Understanding and defending the idea of who is a South African is very important. It is very meaningful. It is not something we should compromise on. As for young Miss Chidima, Nigeria has offered her a place with them, and she will be competing for them in some pageants. Good. She was not pretty enough to compete for South Africa anyway. All the best to her. We now have a course on Teachable. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18, about 12 men from the Bible, where we teach about manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. Check it out. The Libyans. The third reason South Africa has a crisis of meaning was made clear in the saga of the 95 filthy Libyans, fighting-age males found training at a military camp in Mpumalanga. Training for what? Overthrowing Libya, fighting in the Middle East, cash-in transit heists? What exactly were these people training for? It's still not clear. This incident shows us yet another area where South Africa needs to find meaning. When people are asking how this could have happened or been allowed, who these people are and what they were doing here, the underlying question is, what is South Africa? What does it mean to be a country? Who is running this place? And how could that ever have been allowed to occur? This is what is disturbing about this incident, that it even happened in the first place. It turns out that certain government officials, like Zizi Kodwa, no surprise there, were told about the camp and they didn't sort it out, and they knew the sort of training that was going on there. These politicians knew and did nothing about it. To them, the concept of South Africa is meaningless and empty. It's just a place where they get all their millions. It is difficult for them, for things, let alone a country, to have meaning, when those leading the country have no conscience. The conscience works by calling attention to things as being good or bad. One of the tools a person's conscience uses is the ability to assign meaning to things as good or as bad. However, if you're like Zizi Goto and others and do not have a conscience, you will let people run around in your country and do nothing about it, because it's neither good or bad. It's just the way things are. For the concept of a country is meaningless to a person like Zizi and others. The 95 filthy Libyans are what happens when leaders with no conscience, thus no sense of meaning, are running a country, leaving South Africa floating as a concept without grounding in a shared, logical and emotional meaning. Then there is Mboro, the fourth example why South Africa is in a crisis of meaning, why we cannot find any insignificant ways for ourselves and for our nation. Mboro, as he is called, is an effeminate little man who runs around calling himself a pastor. He runs one of those fake churches where they promise miracles, wealth and health, while preaching doctrines of demons and partaking in a little light devil worship. You know the type, they're all over South Africa. Meaningless dens of meaningless, pretending to be engaged in acts full of meaning. They have TV shows, big events, concerts, and some even consult with politicians, selling fake religion for real money, using the internet to scam people out of their money like a fake internet guru, while being a fake pastor, thus proving they are a real fake internet guru. This is Paseka Motsweneng, or Mboro as he is known, a pastor who does not mean well. He means to manipulate, trick and harm people to get as much money out of them as he can. However, even for a man as disgusting as this, walking into your grandchildren's school, demanding they be released into your custody, violating a legal custody agreement with their grandmother, even for Mboro is a lot. Yet not very surprising, because this type are all about power. If he does not control those children, then he loses his mind. I am strongly against child alienation from fathers and grandfathers. This happens every day, caused by equally deranged women backed by the state. However, as a man, you only hurt your case if you try to pick your children up or your grandchildren up from school with a panga and an AK-47 wielding bodyguard. The South African family has largely been destroyed and rendered meaningless and ineffective in significantly influencing society. Based on that, too many South African families are led by emotional women, a lot of the time grandmothers. And of course, on the other side, those grandmothers are opposed by effeminate emotional half-men like Mboro. Was Mboro raised by his grandmother? Just asking. The family in any society is where the individual develops his sense of meaning and purpose. They are formed and organized in a worldview and in a mindset by their family, based on their family in a big way. Sadly, what has happened is that people, especially when they are young, are robbed of meaning because their families are so fractured, so broken, and the rightful heads of those families are not in that family. The rightful heads of all families are the men, and the men are not present, usually not by choice. What is also sad is that the church has done very little to change that and restore the family to meaningfulness in society. Instead, they are money-making schemes for weak, limp-wristed, servile, panga-wielding degenerates that play a pastor on television. Please subscribe or Cyril will rule South Africa forever. Then there is the mayors of Johannesburg. Since Herman Mashaba was mayor in 2016, there have been 8 different mayors when you count Mashaba himself. This is the 8th mayor, recently installed as of August 16, 2024. 2 of the 8 mayors have had 2 terms as mayor, with the DA mayor Mpopalate, a strange and very creepy woman, having a go twice, being pushed out both times, you could say. Then there is Dada Morero, who is the newly installed mayor, having had a term of less than a month the last time he was mayor in September of 2022. Perhaps in this second term, it will be a bit longer. We'll have to wait and see. Why I consider this as part of the crisis of meaninglessness in South Africa is because South Africa actually needs good leaders, especially in the richest city in the country. What this procession of mayors has shown us is that the government itself is lost and confused. They do not understand how to stabilize the city, making for a growing economy and thriving people, which is what we need. They struggle to do that. They, the government, which is supposed to keep the peace and ensure the flourishing, are themselves confused about what is going on here and what to do here. They are not supposed to be here to play games with our lives and our livelihoods, to leave the citizens of Johannesburg exposed to a badly run city where the roads blow up. Most of them are without meaning and purpose in their job, and see it not as building a city or building a people or building part of a country. To them it's just a lucrative position. Those like Mashaba who have meaning and purpose behind them and behind what they do are pushed out and sacrificed at the altar of power games and politics. Perhaps that is just the way it is, and perhaps that's the only way it's ever gonna be. Perhaps we need to do better. I'm not sure how long this mayor will last. He does not fill me with confidence, and he looks unprepared and unsure, like just another political appointee. So I guess he'll be mayor forever. In conclusion, South Africa needs to find meaning and purpose in who we are, what we want our country to be, and where we are going. I recommend a new conservative party with free market ideas with a Christian ethos to bring meaning and purpose to the country. A saying, God has established 3 institutions within human society: the family, the state, and the church. Each institution has a sphere of authority with jurisdiction limits that must be respected. John MacArthur. The case is closed, my friend. South Africa currently has a meaning and purpose crisis. Who are we? Where are we going? And why? We now have a course on Teachable. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18, about 12 men from the Bible, where we teach about manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. Check it out.